Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. My co-host for today's show is Janet Corsi, and my guest co-host is Stephen Murray, with guests Kim Henry, Gregory A. Fournier, and Adele Park. The topic of today's show is audiobooks and the impact on the book industry. We always like to start the show with a few fun quotes, so I'm going to call my panel to help out. And Jan, would you like to read the first one?
I'd love to. According to a December 18th, 2016 article by Michael Kozlowski, publishers have experienced an utterly deplorable year for ebook sales, and most of them have been declines by around 12%. Things have gotten so bad that most of them do not even report how many units were sold.
And Adele, would you like to take the second one, please?
Well, the good news is the same article goes on to say that over the course of the past 3 years, the highest growing segment in publishing are audiobooks. The global audiobook industry is currently valued at $3.5 billion. Right now, the United States is the largest singular market with $1.8 billion in audiobook sales in 2016. This represents a 31% increase from 2015.
And Kim?
Caedmon Records was a pioneer in the audiobook business. It was the first company dedicated to selling spoken word recordings to the public and has been called the seed of the audiobook industry. Caedmon was formed in New York in 1952 by college graduates Barbara Holdridge and Marianne Roney. Their first release was a collection of poems by Dylan Thomas as read by the author. The LP's B-side contained A Child's Christmas in Wales, which was added as an afterthought. The story was obscure, and Thomas himself couldn't remember its title when asked what to use to fill up the B-side. But this recording went on to become one of the most loved works and launched Caedmon into a successful company. The original 1952 recording was a selection for the 2008 United States National Recording Registry, stating it is credited with launching the audiobook industry in the United States.
All right. And Stephen?
And of course, the resurgence of audio storytelling is widely attributed to advances in mobile technologies, such as our smartphones and our tablets and multimedia entertainment systems in cars, also of course known as connected car platforms. Audio drama recordings are also now podcast all over the internet.
All right, and Gregory? Are you there, Gregory?
Scribd, yes, I'm here. Scribd is the second largest company operating in the audiobook sector. Andrew Weinstein, Scribd's VP of Content Acquisition and Strategy Officer, told Goody Reader that this year we've increased our audiobook catalog by more than 17%. We now offer more than 70,000 audiobooks across all genres.
All right, again, today's topic is audiobooks and the impact on the book industry, along with my co-host Janet Corsi and guest co-host Stephen Murray. Our guests for today's show are Gregory A. Fournier, Adele Park, and Kim Henry. Our first guest is Gregory Fournier, and Gregory was born in Trenton, Michigan. He grew up in the Downriver, Detroit area and graduated from Allen Park High School. After reading Lost Horizon as a young teen, he decided that he wanted to be an author. That novel transported him to Shangri-La, and he's been trying to get back there ever since. Gregory earned his bachelor's degree in English and Literature from Eastern Michigan University. He taught high school English in Ypsilanti, Michigan, for 7 years before moving to San Diego, California. After 30 years of teaching for the San Diego Unified Church, School District, and then 10 years working as an adjunct professor at Cuyamaca College in Rancho, San Diego, he decided it was time to retire and attempt a new career as a writer. His first book, entitled Zug Island, a Detroit Wright novel, was published in 2011 by Wheatmark Inc. and won a Best Books Award and a Los Angeles Books Festival Award for multicultural literature. In May of 2013, Greg appeared on the Investigation Discovery Channel as a guest expert on John Norman Collins for their series, A Crime to Remember. The episode, entitled A New Kind of Monster, is available on demand and on YouTube. In 2016, his true crime, Terra in Ypsilanti, won an International Book Award and a Literary Classic Book Award as a finalist in their true crime divisions. Both of his books, ebooks, and his audiobooks are available on Amazon.com. Greg also writes a blog called Fornology at fornology.com. That's FORNOLOGY.com, which has been essential in building an audience for his writing. Greg, will you please tell us a little bit about your books and how they came about?
Yeah, well, thanks for that that extremely long introduction. I'm glad you made it through there. Yeah, my first book was after I retired from teaching English for 37 years. I was able to live out the dream and wrote my first book, which is a thinly disguised memoir, but different enough in parts where I, call it a novel. And it's done quite well. And by the way, this 2017 is the 50th anniversary since the Detroit riots. And I'll be in town in Detroit July 23rd to commemorate that terrible event. But the book did well enough to encourage me to begin another project, Terror in Ypsilanti, about a serial killer who lived down the street from me, actually up the street from me, one block. Didn't know at the time, and after he was captured and his pictures, name ran in the newspapers, I was able to put two and two together and figure it out. And again, 40 years, went by. I had a career, family, kids, retired, and I thought, well, after so down, what story should I write? And I was going to write about the 60s and a drug taking and one thing, and I had a great title called The Psychedelic Pioneers. And I thought, after 30 pages, what a stupid damn book that would be. There are 100 of those out there, and only one or two of them are any good. And, and it was insignificant, of my time. And I thought, right down the street, that is the story to tell, because it had never been told in a non-fictional format, the full story. So there was a vacuum. I hopped in there. It took me 5 years to write it. And the last couple of years to, shape it up and start promoting it. And it's doing very well. And I don't know what else to say other than it's surpassed what most self-published books sell. And I sold over 2,000 copies in the first 6 months. I'm my publisher's best-selling author. And for that honor, they gave me a $2,000 stipend for goods and or services.
Ooh.
So yeah, things are looking pretty good in the writing world.
And you also just recently made a deal to have your books made into audiobook.
Well, yeah, I can turn it towards the subject here. Yeah, and that was the easiest money I ever made. To tell you the truth, I got an email and said, would you, introducing the company, would you be interested in selling the audio rights to Terror in Ypsilanti? And the company was Tantor Media, and I had never heard of them before, but I checked them out on the web, and, legitimate company. And they offered me, and I don't mind talking about money because I declare everything. So $500 is all I got for it. And some people said, you should have held out for more. No, they called me. What an honor,
Yeah.
I'm not going to quibble. So I took their money, and they said they would do everything. They hired a professional New York voice artist. They did all the production. They do the promotion. And their parent company is in Australia, and they publish to all of the English-speaking countries of the world. So I just feel like I fell right into something great. And when I look at the numbers on how many audiobooks have been published in the last year, at least 35,000. I'm kind of proud that mine's one of those.
Yeah.
And it's doing quite well. So.
Well, we're going to talk more about this whole process with Adele as well, because she definitely knows about audiobooks. In fact, Jan, I'm going to let you introduce Adele.
Yes. Adele is our next guest, and I am honored to get to talk about her because she and I have become really good friends over the years. Adele is an Audie award-winning writer, producer, editor, and voice actress at Straight to Audio Productions in St. George, Utah. Park's works include Jitters, a quirky little audiobook, which was a 2011 Audie winner and a multi-voice category. Yikes, which is really one of my very favorites, another quirky audiobook, and Gazooks, a comedy quirky audiobook, which was a 2015 Audie finalist in the original work category. Prior to opening her studio in 2008, Park spent 20 years working as a television and radio news reporter, anchor, and on-air personality. In addition, Park is a freelance writer and photographer. Her articles and photos have been published in numerous magazines, including Etched, View on Magazine, St. George Magazine, and Your Health Magazine. Park will return to the studio this summer to produce her 4th audiobook, and I cannot wait. Why audiobooks? What led you to this, Adele? Because they're magnificent.
Well, I have a story that a lot of writers can relate to. Not everybody is as fortunate as Greg, where they get a great publishing deal and then someone comes to them with an offer to produce their audiobook. My story was that I had written a couple of novels and I wanted to turn them into audiobooks. But I wrongly thought in order to have something become an audiobook, it must first come out as a regular book. And so I went through the whole process of trying to get a publisher, but I couldn't get a publisher interested in me because I didn't have an agent. So I tried to get an agent, but they didn't want to represent me because I had never been published. So it was just an impossible circle to break into.
Oh, my.
And when I really analyzed why I even wanted to be published, it always came back to this. I wanted my work to be turned into an audiobook. And so I had this sort of aha moment where I thought, okay, I'm going to just bypass the entire publishing industry. So in 2008, I formed an LLC called Straight to Audio Productions. None of my projects are available in book form. They are only available as audiobooks. And now, as I approach another project, I write my scripts specifically for audiobook format.
Aha. Well, you have such a unique style. And once you start listening to your audiobooks, they're darn near impossible to put down. My daughter, as a matter of fact, has gone to Arizona for the weekend, and she figured it's a 5-hour drive. She'd get at least half the book listened to before she got to her destination. She called at 4 o'clock this morning to say she finished the book.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So even though she got to her destination, she didn't stop listening. That's how good they are.
We're going to introduce the next guest, and then Adele, please stay with us because we're going to talk in depth about the audiobooks and what your involvement with those are. Stephen?
Well, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our next guest, Kim Henry. Kim is an author and bookstore owner. She was born in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Kim grew up in western Pennsylvania and moved to Southern California in 1993. An avid reader and book collector, Kim had always yearned to open a bookstore. Kim has an undergraduate degree in accounting and general management and a master's degree in finance. After 26 plus years in corporate America, Kim left to pursue her dream of opening her own bookstore. She considers her store her Zen place. Kim Henry continues her work as a commercial realtor while supporting local authors, providing a venue for book signings and charitable events with her store, Books or Books. Kim's independent bookstore is located at 3460 East Sunset in Las Vegas, for those of you who are local. Kim is a contributor to the book Luck, When Preparation Meets Opportunity, which is a compilation from 9 lucky authors who understand the importance of being ready when opportunity knocks. In their own area of specialty and expertise, these 9 authors are masters at preparation. They comprehend what goes into winning. Though considered by many to be lucky, these 9 leaders know the facts, and thankfully they are willing to share them. So, Kim, you have a treasure trove of a bookstore at Books or Books. Has opening the bookstore been everything you hoped it would become?
Yes, it has, and more. Living out a lifelong dream of owning a bookstore, I've finally been able to realize that. But on top of that, I've had to learn to be flexible within in the industry of books and literature and publishing, and sort of go with the flow and find out what people read, and make adaptations as I move along. Audiobooks is one of the things that we've actually started selling in our independent bookstore. People used to come in and ask for CDs, and we didn't have those, so we would send them to the library. And then after a while, we sent people to Amazon, and now we have our own resource that we can sell from our website through a company that works just with independent bookstores. So it's been fun, and it gives us another avenue to get the word out there.
Yeah, and there's a group of people in Las Vegas who are a part of an association with independent bookstores. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting how the small mom and pop stores are coming back into the realm of thing. And Stephen, I believe you sent me an email about an article about Barnes and Nobles. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was on Fox Business News saying that they had a big meeting last week deciding what to do to handle the changes in the marketplace, and the shift away from people reading, physically reading the paperback books. And it was quite an interesting article.
Yeah. So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly. My co-hosts for today's show are Janet Corsi and Stephen Murray. My guests are Gregory A. Fournier, Adele Park, and Kim Henry. The topic of today's show is audiobooks and the impact on the book industry. So, Kim, how much of an impact does audiobooks have in your store?
Well, speaking as a reader myself, and the amount of time I actually have to read, I listen to more audiobooks than I do reading books, and
Oh.
I've got 30,000 plus books at my fingertips, and I do audiobooks. So there's a time and a place. Before I go to bed at night, I read. But if I'm in my car, I listen to audiobooks. So everything has its place, is the way I believe it is.
Yeah. Adele, and do you decide on a cast to do your books or individual narrate a book? How does that go about?
Well, one of the things that you need to consider when you are turning, especially a novel, into an audiobook is how many people are going to narrate it. Let's say your script was, it was a dark and stormy night. Sally said, I think I'll go out and get some ice cream. Well, who is going to say it was a dark and stormy night? And then Sally comes in secondly, and she's also another voice. And then David comes in and says, but we're out of gas, we can't go. And then there's some more narration talking about the weather. It can get very complicated if you are doing a multi-voiced narrated book, if you are assigning each little piece to an individual actor. And so to get around that, because I had written traditional novels with the first couple of books that I wrote, I decided, well, my work is more character-centric anyway. So why don't I rewrite these entire novels and put them into first-person narratives? And so I could still have a multi-voiced project, because I felt it was really important that each of these characters had their own unique voice, but I could resolve the problem of what to do about all that copy in between the speakers. And so what I do with my projects is I have a wraparound narration for each of my audiobooks. For example, in Jitters, we have a radio broadcast. It's a news report, and then the character comes on after the news report and reacts to the news of the day. In my last audiobook, in Gadzooks, it was narrated by a polygamist who was deceased and was looking down on the action from heaven and commenting on it. And then after he would do his little narration piece, then each of the individual characters would come on and tell you what their story was. So I kind of cleaned up that issue of what to do about all of these different voices and still let my characters have their own unique sound.
Yeah, and we actually talked a little bit about that yesterday. I spoke with you about it, in that, you do have to consider whatever novel you have, how you would go about narrating, because we talked about how it may just be one person, or you could have a whole cast. It depends on how the book is written or rewritten. What I also find interesting, as Adele, is that you were talking about how when you write, you think in the terms of audiobook, because a lot of writers, like I write scripts, but a lot of times when I write a script, it's written differently than a novel. But I'll write a script, and then from there I'll create the novel, and it is a whole different animal. And I guess from what you're telling me, audiobooks is a little different as well.
Certainly. Now, just to be clear, most audiobooks, or many of them, especially if they are novels, are narrated by a singular narrator who does all of the voices for all of the characters. This is a highly specialized skill, and I have nothing but respect for narrators who do this, because this is a very hard task. Let's take Harry Potter, for example. There are numerous characters. The guy that narrated Harry Potter was so skilled at his job that he could go from Harry to Hermione to Professor Dumbledore all in one paragraph, and you would know specifically who was speaking at that time, even though it was just one guy reading the script. So that's how a traditional novel usually is put into audiobook format. And if you are looking at producing an audiobook, you should consider maybe just having one narrator. Of course, you want to find one that's really good, one that can seamlessly go from one character to the next without the listener having to struggle to figure out who it is that is speaking at a particular moment.
I'm going to just ask Greg a question. Greg, how is it you go about selling your audiobooks, or do you just leave that up to the person you did the contract with for marketing?
Well, I leave it up to Cantor, and they market through audible.com. So that's the biggest audio retailer, and they handle most of it. But like my book, and again, being self-published, I have an author website, and I direct market myself and my books, and try to draw attention to the fact that I do have an audio out there, and sending books to an international audience, the postage is pretty high. So
Yeah.
I have been trying to hit any of the European or other international sites that I have on Facebook, with the notion that, you buy the audio book and the shipping is free, it's instantaneous. And so I do some grassroots promotion. But beyond that, I'm not even exactly sure how the book is doing, because I won't find out for a couple more months when I see some data, and it's only been out for maybe 2 months, so it's still pretty early.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Actually, I had a question for Adele. I was interested in your comment, Adele, that you now do your books in first person. Did I hear you correctly on that?
Adele?
I'm having a little bit of trouble in understanding Stephen, so perhaps if you could repeat his question for me.
Yeah,
because I'm in a remote studio, so I'm not really understanding what he's asking.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he just wanted to know about the first person aspect of it. You had mentioned that you write your books in the first person.
Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, then my question
So
is...
first person
Go ahead,
First
Adele.
person example would be, say my character's name was Jan. Everything that she says to you is just from her perspective, and there are no other voices when Jan is speaking. So for my audiobooks, each chapter has a different speaker with an overall wraparound narration piece.
The reason why that interested me is because I think most books in the past have been written in third person, and now you're saying that you're doing yours in first person. Do you think, and I think there's been a shift from people writing in third person to first person.
I write in the first person.
Yes, but that's been a shift. There was a time when people never wrote in first person.
Right,
It was always third. And
Right.
I'm wondering how much is attributable to a shift perhaps in audio books
Oh.
and people thinking in the same fashion that Adele is when it comes to writing. And I wonder if that can be attributable to the audiobook industry.
Adele, what do you have to say about that?
Again, I really truly apologize, but I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing the speaker. So if you could repeat the question to me.
Yeah, he just wanted to know. We were talking about how, like, for instance, I write in the first person when I write novels, and I do that because I go from script to novels. So it's easier for me to write in the first person, which is very unusual. So we're wondering if, because there's more and more of a shift of authors writing in the first person. Is that true, Kim? I mean, you have a bookstore, so are you finding that to be the case? Because there are a few authors out there that write in the first person.
There seems to be more now than there was.
Yeah.
I never thought
Over
why.
a period of time.
Yeah, so we were just wondering how that affects, is there an effect with, or how does that affect the audiobook market, or is that a good thing, actually?
Well,
I'm
it's
not really sure how that affects the audiobook market. What I know from myself is that it accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. And one of the great things about having my own studio is that I really don't have to do things the way they are traditionally done by other studios. And I would say that it actually has worked for me because Jitters, my very first audiobook, won an Audie for multi-voice production. And so that was the audiobook where we had the newscast at the beginning of each chapter and then each character reacting to the news of the day. And so that was different, and apparently it caught the attention of the Audio Publishers Association because we were fortunate enough to win an Audie as a result.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about how a book is turned into an audiobook. What would be the first step? Let's say I have no clue what I'm doing. So if I were to approach you, what would I need to do or say to make you understand what I'm trying to accomplish, Adele?
My first reaction to everyone that asks me about audiobooks is spend some time on ACX. That is Audiobook Creation Exchange, more commonly known as ACX. This is a subsidiary of Audible.com, which Greg had mentioned that he is selling his products on Audible.com. That's one of the sites I sell my products on as well. This is also a subsidiary of Amazon. So it's a great place to be. It is a marketplace for authors, publishers, and producers. So ACX is a place where you can go and find a narrator to narrate your audiobook. And you can even negotiate the price that you pay for this. In some cases, you can get narrators who will actually produce your product for you for no cost in exchange for 50% of the royalties once it is on sale on Audible.com. So there's lots of different ways that you can go about making an audiobook, but this is actually the easiest, most comprehensive site. Authors can find people to produce audiobooks. They can pick out their narrators. Narrators can create profiles so authors can find them, and publishers can find scripts to be recorded. Getting back to the case of Greg's book, you know, he had a company that somehow found his book and contacted him. And so there are publishers out there that are looking for scripts to be recorded, and ACX is a great way to get your project listed for potential publishers to discover you.
So it sounds like that more and more the audiobook industry is coming into its own. To me, it sounds that way. Kim, how about you? When you're ordering, how do you determine how many audiobooks to order for your store and what books to order?
Well, we belong to an organization that's called LibroFM.fm, and it works just like Audible.com does. So, and we sell it through our website, which takes you to our link, and then we actually make money off of each book that's sold. But if you just go to Libro.fm, Then there's a list that says pick out your favorite bookstore. So if you live in Oregon and you want to pick Powell's, you go to Oregon, you pick Powell's, and then you go into thousands of books. I believe they have almost as many as Audible does now. And you pick out the book, and then Powell's makes a little bit of money off of it. So we have the world at our fingertips, and it's sort of neat when you think about it, because it allows the indie bookstores and the mom and pops, even though a store like Powell's is large, it still allows us small bookstores to survive in the world of Amazon.
Yeah, yeah. I am curious too, Greg. When you had yours made into an audio, did you even did they approach you at all about narrating your own, or did they just you were completely left out of the loop on that? How did that go about?
Once I was initially approached by a marketing rep from Cantor, and then I was assigned a gentleman called Chris Shula, and he is a professional voice artist with lots of credit, and so I listened to some of his, the 5-minute free samples that you get when you're, browsing, and I liked the sound of his voice. I did a great job, so I approved him as the narrator, and then he and I went back and forth on the phone and on the internet to work on the pronunciation of some of the names in the book. Ypsilanti in the title, for instance, unless you're from that area, most people don't know how to pronounce that. And so he gave me, 7 or 8 pages of stuff, and I sat and recorded, the pronunciations for him. And that was the end of my involvement. And 2-3 weeks after that, the finished product was there, and I got a couple of free copies of it, and it sounded pretty good.
So it sounds like you were involved with the project somewhat.
Yeah, somewhat, but I don't want to put a damper on anybody's parade, but I haven't been able to listen to the whole audio book because I had to read that sucker so many times, editing, revising it, that I hope I never have to read it again the rest of my life. But I've been told that it's very good.
We all go through that, and I don't know how many times somebody has said, "Well, you remember on page 92 when your character said blah blah blah." Oh my God! I wrote that book so long ago. I don't even know if it has a page 92.
Yeah.
But you read something over and over and over again. You don't want to read it. You don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
There is a point of diminishing returns, and that's why you hire editors.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So, what are some of the things you need to consider before you approach preparing the script for an audiobook? And Adele, I'm sure you're the best person to ask for that.
Well, we've talked about, who's going to narrate it, whether it's going to be a singular person or a multi-voice.
Okay.
And at this point, I would like to jump in here and say, if you are an expert in your subject, let's say you've written a nonfiction book,
Okay.
you might consider wanting to narrate it yourself. Let's say you're an astronomer and you've written a book about Mars. Your credibility as an astronomer could actually enhance the product because you work in that field, and so you probably know more about it than your average layperson. One of the other things that you need to remember is that the length of your audiobook is going to determine the cost of having someone produce it for you. And people often ask me, how do I figure out how long my audiobook is? Because when you go on ACX, they are going to ask for a per finished hour rate. That means how long it will take after the edit is already done. So to figure that out, take a full page of your copy, read it at the pace that you think would be the pace you want it to be read at in the final product, and time it. So let's say it takes 2.5 minutes. All right, times 2.5 minutes by however many pages that you have. Because producers are always going to want to know how many per finished hours is this project. So if you can figure that out ahead of time, that's really helpful to whoever you're querying about the project.
Yeah, I would think it would be difficult. Like if I wanted to narrate one of my novels, I probably wouldn't do it. I just don't think that I could. From what you were talking about, you really have to you have to drive the characters. You have to be the characters, and to switch back and forth between characters and maintaining, I guess, their nuance or the way they speak. To me, would be difficult. Maybe I'm making it more difficult in my mind than I need to. So I don't think I would want to narrate my own book. To me, I think you would really have to think about that before you decide to do so.
Well,
It is
like
difficult.
I've heard, I don't even remember where, but schools like out here in the University of California, UCLA, have programs for voice artists now where you can get masters and other degrees and certifications because it is such a specialized skill.
Well, I know the people that do Adele's books are very specialized. When you hear them, there's no mistake on who they are and what they're going to be speaking.
But Adele, you actually you write yours deliberately to have a cast. Is that correct?
I do, because that was the format that I chose when I decided to make my first audiobook. Because as I said, I wanted to have each actor have an individual voice, and that's the way that it was easiest to produce it. And then getting back to Greg's comment about the narration schools, there are lots of them out there, and there are lots of really great narrators. Some of the narrators that I've worked with, I've asked them, well, how do you narrate a multi-voice project? And many of them, what they do is they color code their script so that they know when they see something green, that means character A. When they see something highlighted in yellow, that means character B. And when they see something highlighted in orange, that's character C. So that they can easily move throughout the script without having to stop and record individual little things and do a big complicated edit. So it is a highly specialized skill, and I have nothing but admiration for those who are able to do it. Now, with my characters, they only have to stay in character for one person.
Yeah.
So I end up hiring a lot of theater characters because they don't have to have that skill. They just have to have a good speaking voice and be able to hold that same character for however many chapters they have.
And this kind of goes right back to what we were talking about when you were talking about the cost of turning a book into an audiobook, because you have to determine if you're going to hire someone, an individual, to narrate. Obviously, your cost isn't going to be near as much. But if you're hiring a cast to create your audiobook, let's say you're self-publishing it, then your cost is going to be considerably different. Wouldn't you say, Adele?
Yes, it is for me, for sure. But again, this is my preferred format, so I don't mind the extra cost because I want to have these individual actors. What would make it really expensive, though, is if you had a full cast and you had a whole bunch of microphones and you had a conversation where one character speaks and then another character speaks and then another character speaks. That can get really complicated. That can be a complicated edit as well, especially if, say, you have to record some of these actors individually and then edit them in later into one piece. So, that's I think why audiobooks started out with just one narrator reading the entire script, because it's just a lot easier to do that. And so you had a group of actors out there who learned how to do this and make it believable. Because all you have to do is make sure that the listener knows what character is speaking when they're hearing it.
Well, I have a question as well when it comes to the cost, because when you're publishing a novel, you have to consider everything. You have to consider how many pages. Actually, the number of pages is very important, and whether it's going to be hardbound or paperback bound. When it comes to audiobooks, how do you determine the cost factor there? Like, do you first set up whether it's going to be narrated by one or a cast, and then what does it cost to produce that audiobook once you've completed it?
So you want to figure out how long your audiobook is going to be, and we talked about timing your pages so you have sort of a ballpark figure of how long the entire project's going to be.
Okay.
Then you have to factor in whether you're going to have more than one narrator. Typically on ACX, the bottom rate is $50 per finished hour. Now, that means typically on ACX that the person that is doing that for you is doing all of the editing as well as recording it. Now, they may not master the product, and you should have it mastered before you put it on ACX or audible.com or turn it into an actual disc. Mastering is a process whereby you make sure the first chapter and the second chapter aren't different, that the files are even. So you don't want it to be really loud in chapter 1 and then really quiet in chapter 2. What you're trying to do is even everything out so that all your levels are pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that happens in mastering is they oftentimes put on lots of nice filters and they just make it a richer, nicer sound. So while I record and edit all of my projects here at Straight to Audio Productions, I do hire Spiral Studios here in St. George to do all of my mastering. It is well worth the money. This is not a cheap process, but for me, if I'm going to compete, on a national level, I can't have basement-sounding audio. And so the mastering brings all that together, especially since if I have so many different narrators, even though I try and record them all at the same levels, there is still a little bit of difference between each and every actor. And so we want all of that evened out. You don't want somebody driving down the street, listening to your audiobook and turning it up and turning it down because it's too loud on one chapter and not loud enough on the next.
Yes.
I think we need someone to master this show. Okay, so I'm still curious though about determining the cost. Like, okay, let's say I know what yours are. I listened to the one book you have, and I'm just curious as to how the finished product. How do you determine that cost? It's how much you spent. I know that, and what it costs you to master the audiobook. But is there a set of, here's an example. If you go to Barnes & Nobles, if you're a self-published author and your book retails for more than $15.95, they're very reluctant to carry your book in the store because it's going to be difficult for them to sell that book. So that's why when you're writing your novel, you have to keep into consideration the length of that book, because printing cost is important in order for you to determine how much to charge for the book. If it's more than 300 pages, you're going to end up charging more than $15.95 for the book because it costs you more to produce each book. So when it comes to audiobooks, is that formula the same? Like, do you have to consider all that, and what does a normal audiobook sell for? Adele?
I'm not sure what normal audiobooks sell for, but MP3 downloads, which is what you're buying on audible.com, are basically all the same. If you're a member of Audible, you can buy Book A and Book B and Book C all for the same price. And one could be written by Stephen King and one could be written by an unknown author.
Okay.
So that just depends. And in terms of a physical product, this is something that I would like to talk about a little bit because all of your authors already have physical books, and so they
Right.
are allowed to sell on audible.com. I did not have a book, so I had to first be on Amazon in order to be able to sell on Audible. That meant I had to have a physical copy. Now with Jitters, a quirky little audiobook, that came out in WAV format. WAV format is basically how every CD you buy at the store comes to you. It's a rich, full-sounding audio disc. You can get about 70 minutes worth of audio per disc if it is in WAV format. So with Jitters, a quirky little audiobook, it was 6.5 hours, and that meant that it was 5 CDs. And so each time you have a CD, your price goes up. So when I did Yikes, another quirky audiobook, and when I did Gadzooks, a comically quirky audiobook, I tried something new. I put those in MP3 format to begin with. And so Yikes is a 10.5-hour audiobook, and I got it on one disc. And Gadzooks is a 7.5-hour audiobook, and that got on one disc. If I had put Yikes in WAV format, that would have been 10 to 11 discs. So you can see where my price would go clear to the ceiling, if I had done it that way.
Yeah.
I do not believe that you lose that much quality when you compress it down into MP3 format. And the person that gave me the courage to do this is actually the writer Stephen King, because I had bought one of his audiobooks, and it was 30 hours long, but he put it out in MP3 format, so I bought it on 3 discs rather than
Yeah.
30 discs. So the
Jeepers.
price was cheaper because I was paying for less product, and it was more user friendly because I didn't have to, I listened to it on a really long road trip, so I didn't have to keep changing the discs.
Right.
So that is something that people should consider is how are we going to put this out? Now, the problem with MP3 versus WAV is that some older players, and I mean really old ones now, will not read an MP3 disc.
Right.
And so
Ah.
occasionally I get somebody that buys my product, even though it's labeled MP3 format right on the front. They'll get it and they'll say, well, I can't play it in my car. Well, your car must be 15 or 20 years old because any newer car would have a reader that's able to play an MP3 disc.
Mhm.
Well, an amazing not right now is most of the new cars, the higher end cars, have no CD players in them at all
Why is that?
because everybody's going to using their iPhones and iTunes on their cars.
Oh, okay.
So we need to come up with
And
Oh,
see,
I have
that's
a question.
the advantage of Audible.com because if you're on Audible.com, there is no cost associated with it. People download that directly onto their iPhones and plug it in their car.
right.
So you haven't had to pay for any physical product at all. I always have to have a physical product because that's the only way I can get on Amazon, and I can't be on Audible unless I'm on Amazon first. But most
That was the
writers,
question.
most writers already have a book, and so they're already qualified because they're already selling their book on Amazon.com. So all they have to do is turn it into an MP3 format, and they don't have to make a physical product at all.
And Greg, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just, it's the hard goods versus soft goods. Hard goods being the discs. Do you? And I think you answered this. Do you sell, the soft goods, the streaming product?
Yeah, and that's where most of my sales come from, is from MP3 downloads, as opposed to physical products. Because as Janet was mentioning before, our listening habits are changing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we really aren't using physical products anymore. We're using digital downloads. Think about the way that you watch TV now. Do you buy as many movies? Probably not. You probably get them as a streaming or a Netflix type service, and you aren't actually buying the movie.
Right. Fire stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was going to
I'm
that was
old school.
that was one of the questions I had. Is like I know with Greg, you do book signings. I'm assuming, right? Greg,
Pardon me?
do you still do book
Yeah.
signings? And when you do your book signings,
Yeah,
do you?
but I'm about to give them up. The window for really promoting a book is 6 months to a year, and I'm at the outer limits of that. And pretty soon, all of my marketing will be online and through third-party entities.
But
Just because I want to step back and have more time for writing and less time doing the business end of things.
but when you are doing book signings, do you take the audiobooks with you as well?
Oh no,
No. Okay.
no, just books, and I direct them to Amazon, and they can buy it there if
And-
that's what
and
they want.
Kim, in your store, if someone came in and it's an author, and you represent a lot of local authors, you have them come in and do signings. If they had an audiobook as well as a physical book, would you allow them to sell both?
Yes, I do. And they sometimes, when they have both, they have a little card that's like a little postcard or something like that that has the link that people pay them for, and then they can send the link. And then if they're doing a signing, they have people sign that little card. I
Okay.
mean, the author does.
Oh, that's clever.
So audiobooks can be sold basically the same way a physical book, because the physical books are going the way of ebooks. If you think about it, and kind of like what Adele was talking about, they're doing away with the physical aspect and trying to do the download aspect. So, I do have a question for you, Adele, because this is important as well. When if they're considering doing an audiobook, what do you think the time frame should be if someone's just self-narrating as opposed to hiring characters to narrate? Adele?
You know, I think it just depends on how long the project is, and I don't think that you should consider length as a factor. I think you should tell your story and do it like you normally would do for a regular book. I wouldn't, like Yikes was 10 and a half hours long. I wasn't about to cut chapters from that book just because it was super long. That's how long it took to tell the story. So I don't let length be something that scares me off personally. I write however much copy it takes to tell the story I want to tell in that particular book.
Okay. Well, I think we're also seeing a shift in who listens to audiobooks, because it used to be, really, I think it was something that was set up for the disabled. And I think now it's like what Kim was saying a while ago, and Stephen, and even Jan, you mentioned that people can download and listen to it in their car.
Right.
I'm sure in the bigger cities, if you're on the subway, it's a great way to hear a book on the way without having to carry a physical book. So,
Right.
you know, and
Exercising in the gym.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. I suppose if you're in the kitchen cooking, you could put your headset on and listen to something there.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, where can we learn more about your books?
I have an author central Amazon central author page. So just by typing my name or my book title, I'm all over the internet, so it's hard not to find me. My personal website is GregoryAFournier.com, and that takes you to the site where I give some background on my books and direct market them, autograph them. Many people want them autographed, and I can sell them a little bit cheaper than Amazon can. So that's been helping me. And at first, the first quarter that it was out, I was just barely, but outselling Amazon. So I was splitting that market, and it struck me that it affects my Amazon ranking. So I went to my author page and checked it out, and found that my book was on a biography memoir list, number 4.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, I would have certainly been number 1 had I not been cutting my own throat. But the direct marketing, I made more profit to get my my seed money back.
Yeah.
And so I'm done that and more. So now I'm shifting everything to Amazon.
And Adele, where can we go to acquire your work?
So all 3 of my audiobooks, Jitters, a quirky little audiobook, Yikes, another quirky audiobook, and Gadzooks, a comically quirky audiobook, are all available on Amazon and Audible.com. Additionally, I'm on Downpour.com. And one thing that we didn't have an opportunity to talk about is Findaway. And my projects are all listed in Findaway. And this is a company that sells digital downloads to libraries. And at first I was a little nervous about that. Well, people can just download my book, and I'll never get any money for it. That's not really how it works. Findaway buys your audiobook, and they'll negotiate it for a higher price than you would list it for on, say, Audible. So let's say you have it listed at $14.99 on Audible. They'll sell it for $30, and the people that listen to your audiobook can only do it one at a time. So your $30 doesn't provide that to everybody who wants it anytime they want it. It's like a regular book. You have to check it out. Only in this case, it's a digital download.
Okay.
So I've been really happy with Findaway.
Oh, it sounds great.
Findaway.com, is that how we can find out more about it?
Yes, it is. And Greg, I would suggest that you take a look at that yourself. That might be another market that you can open up on, because you already have digital downloads, and so it's already in that format.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Well,
It's been
also,
very informative.
yeah, and Adele, I'd like to mention that actors interested in auditioning should contact Adele Park at quirkyaudiobooks@infowest.com. and all recordings will be done at Parks Studio in St. George, Utah, and that's QUIRKYAUDIOBOOKS at INFOWEST.com. Quirky Audiobooks at infowest.com. Do you have anything else to add to that, Adele?
We do pay all our actors, and I hire several actors out of Las Vegas. It's just a 2-hour drive from my house. And so I hope that anyone that is interested will definitely hit me up, and I will make arrangements to do an audition. And this is sort of for Janet only because I know she's a pet lover, but there are going to be lots of pets involved in my next audiobook. So I will make sure that Janet gets a copy as soon as it comes out.
Oh, you'd better. I love your books. You know I do.
Well, we're getting down to the last minute of the show, so I'd like to thank my guests Adele Park, Kim Henry, and Gregory A. Fournier, along with my co-hosts Janet Corsi and Stephen Murray. We post our shows on YouTube. Oh, okay, yeah, all right. Stephen just pointed out that where can we learn more about your bookstore? I forgot all about that. Kim?
I think, as Stephen mentioned earlier, we're on the corner of Sunset and Pecos in Las Vegas, and we're open 7 days a week, and we have a website, booksorbooks.com.
Oh, okay. All right, so anyway, we post our shows on youtube.com and /Aspects of Writing. So to learn more about our show, please also go to our Aspects of Writing website. That's aspectsofwriting.com. On our next show, we'll be discussing the writers' groups, good or bad, and our guests for that show will be S.H. Montgomery and Gregory A. Compass, along with Stephen Murray and Janet Corsi. So until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you, everyone.
Great show.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
You're welcome.